Hey, how's it going, everybody, and welcome back into the SFS channel. My name is Gavin, and today we're going to talk through some more must-have players, 5 of them in today's episode, kind of piggybacking off of our episode from late last week. So if you have not checked that video out, make sure to go do so on the SFS channel. And if you're new around here, of course, drop down, click that subscribe button, and turn the bell on so you're never late for a new video. But today, we're going to keep working our way through the draft board here, talking some middle round targets that are must-have players. I think that these are guys who have exceptional situations and opportunities to succeed this season. So I'm not going to waste any more time. Let's get right into things with our first must-have players here in between roughly the 5th and 7th rounds of our drafts this season. All right, as I just mentioned, these players in today's episode are going to be roughly between the 5th and 7th rounds of your drafts. Their ADPs are going to fluctuate throughout this offseason, so if you're watching this in July or August, or maybe you are really behind the ball and you've got yourself or not necessarily behind the ball, but you got yourself a late, early September draft, meaning late in the fantasy draft season, but in the early stages of September. I believe kickoff is September 8th this season. Whenever you're watching it, ADP might be a little bit differently here, but these players are the key here. The value is great right now. Again, that could change, but these are the names that I'm looking to keep my eye on, especially at this particular area on the board at this point in time. So Travis Etienne for the Jacksonville Jaguars is the first name that I am really excited about here. His ADP is currently 55th overall, which, based on the other running backs you're seeing go off the table, I think he's an absolute steal, has the highest upside of any of those players, if you ask me. I expect the Jags to be kind of a poor passing offense this season, or total team in general, but I think that the one guy who can really prevail through this situation is Travis Etienne. There's a variety of factors and circumstances that you factor into what he's going to bring to the table this year, and I think it screams fantasy football success where he's being drafted right now between the RB 20 to 24 range, depending on your various leagues. So ADP right now has him as the RB 22 off the board, but again, I see a ton of upside. I think he can smash on this ADP and be someone we talk about next year or at the end of this coming season as one of the really, really highly touted players that was, again, a huge lineup hit for us. So first and foremost here, Etienne obviously did not play in his rookie season. He had the leg issue, which kept him out the whole year. We never saw him in action. We had that whole debacle last season where Urban Meyer wanted to use him as a wide receiver. But now that Doug Peterson's in town, I see a lot of positive green flags that make me really excited about the situation. Before we even get into that, you've got the fact here that James Robinson, the team's prior lead RB, had a December Achilles rupture or tear, whatever you want to call it. And that's huge. That's a very significant injury, especially at the running back position. That's going to zap some explosiveness from J-Rob. That's going to cause him to take some time to get back out there healthy and fully back to himself. We saw a guy like Cam Akers try and come back and ridiculously fast time from his Achilles injury late last summer, and he was able to make it back for the Rams Super Bowl run, but he was clearly not the same guy that he was in his rookie season. He was nowhere near as efficient. He wasn't as effective when out there on the field, and I expect a lesser talent of a player in James Robinson to see just as much, if not more, side effects and be hindered by that issue. So I think that opens up the door for Travis Etienne to have a lot of area for success, a lot of upside in this Jaguars offense, and that's the basis of things to start getting excited about here. So now you've got Doug Peterson coming in as a new head coach. Thank God Urban Meyer is no longer the Jags head coach, because that situation was a disaster from day one, obviously, if you're following last season. But you've got Doug Peterson, a guy who comes in and has 8 seasons of experience as either an offensive coordinator or as a head coach. In 6 of those 8 seasons, he is finished in the top 1/2 of the National Football League in rushing attempts. So you've got an opportunity for very quality volume. Now, that's not to say that he runs his tailbacks and his backfield members into the ground and just pounds them all day long, but this is a guy who emphasizes running the football. It's clearly a priority to him. in 75% of those seasons as, again, a head coach or offensive coordinator, you're getting top half of the NFL rushing production from that offense, which is something I think is really important. Additionally, his lead back has 17 and a half opportunities per game, so that's going to combine your rushing attempts, your targets in the passing game, so not just raw receptions in volume per se, but you're also getting those targets as well, which don't always turn into and materialize into fantasy points, but the opportunity that's there is extremely important because that shows you that the door will be open for them to utilize that talent, which obviously Travis Etienne, being a first-round pick by the Jags last season, the 2021 NFL Draft, one of just 2 running backs, him and Najee Harris selected in round 1. So you've got a lot to work with here. You've got the fact that he's a phenomenal receiver, and just something to tack onto that. Trevor Lawrence led the National Football League in check down passes last season. So you're talking about a guy coming out of the backfield with a highly coveted receiving skill set. I think that's going to bode very well for him. And again, because of his excelling traits in that category, you could see him push north of Doug Peterson's lead back, his statistical average of seeing just over 4 targets per game in the receiving game. You could see Travis Etienne start to accentuate that number and show you more volume in that area, which, if there's anything we know about the running back position, players that catch passes at a high level are guys that can be absolute game changers in lineups. So at this price, with this skill set, with the situation evolving into what it's become here as we look towards the 2022 season, there is no reason that I do not want Travis Etienne on my team. I wish I've gotten a hold of him in more best ball formats. I will be drafting a lot of him in redraft this year, and I see the sky being the limit for a player with this skill set. And again, the way that the situation has evolved and morphed has been really exciting as well. Not that, we're excited for James Robinson's downfall here or for that injury, but I'm really excited to see what Travis Etienne can bring to the table here. So, again, if you guys are new around here, make sure to drop down, click that subscribe button, turn the bell on. If you've got questions for me, drop those down in the comment section. And if you're enjoying here what we've got at SFS, check out the community Discord server or some of the links in the description of today's episode. Allen Robinson's my next must-have player here for this upcoming fantasy football season. Must draft, must own, must have, whatever you want to call it. These are dudes you want in your lineup. And boy, doesn't A-Rob look happy to be in that LA Rams #1 uniform. Looks pretty good as well. I could not be more excited for a guy who has had probably some of the worst collective quarterback play throughout his career in recent memory. I mean, for the talent that Allen Robinson possesses, Blake Bortles, Nick Foles, Mitchell Trubisky, rookie Justin Fields. I mean, it really can't get worse than that. And I'm probably forgetting some names in there as well. If you think about, I think his first season in Chicago was 2018. So that was technically Mitchell Trubisky primetime. But there's been a lot of poor, average at best quarterback play and below average quarterback play as well. I think that maybe something could have materialized between A-Rob and Justin Fields had Justin been further along in his development as a player. But all besides the point, he's a Ram now. He's tied to Matthew Stafford, and that in of itself is so exciting because you've got a quarterback with a legitimate arm talent, a guy who is a Super Bowl winning quarterback now, and someone who just brings a lot more upside. In the offensive infrastructure, the nucleus of this team is just so good for fantasy football success. You're going to see A-Rob absolutely tear it up in the middle of the field and just crush the number 2 and 3 defensive backs that he's going to be playing against because Cooper Kupp is going to be sucking so much attention to his area of the field. And you've got other weapons in this offense as well, from a very strong, balanced run game where you're going to have to worry about potentially by week 4 or 5 next season, a full-strength Cam Akers. Darrell Henderson got the job done while he was called on last year. There's just so many moving pieces, McVay calling plays in this offense that you love to see that weren't present for Allen Robinson at other points in his career. This is a guy who has had 3 seasons of 1,100 or more receiving yards, 4 150-plus target seasons where he was traditionally, A-Rob has been the best wide receiver on the NFL roster that he plays for, whether it was the Jags or the Bears. He has typically been the number 1 option. This is kind of a change of scenery here. You've got a situation where I'd say Cooper Kupp is the clear number 1 in this offense, and now we're looking towards A-Rob as a guy who's going to feast on that, again, second and third tier coverage. And there isn't another guy in the league who I think, I would feel more comfortably with. Now, obviously, there are other legitimate, bona fide number ones, but there's not another number 2 receiver that I think, could necessarily eat this up as good as A-Rob should. His routes are pristine. He's incredibly savvy. He has great hands, phenomenal at the catch point. He's going to tear it up. And I think that, again, the offensive ceiling for overall production as a whole, not just for A-Rob, but for the Rams offense, is the best infrastructure and gives him the best situations to have continued fantasy football success. And that bounces into play with OBJ and Robert Woods both not being on the roster. Obviously, Robert was traded to the Titans after the A-Rob acquisition, and OBJ remains a free agent. So, again, stuff I absolutely love to see here, and I could not be more excited to draft shares of A-Rob as a wide receiver 2 for fantasy leagues this season. JuJu Smith-Schuster is the next name I want to talk about here today. The new Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver. Now, I hope if someone has a jersey swap or edit of JuJu in a Chiefs uniform, I would love that. Please drop that in the Discord server. So if you haven't checked that out, and if you have access to one of those photos, please hit me up, because I am not enjoying looking at this ketchup and mustard type vibe we've got going on right now with the red Chiefs logo and then the yellow Steelers uniforms. But besides the point, JuJu's ADP right now, 56.5. I forgot to mention A-Rob. He's going at the 51.4 overall selection right now. So JuJu, again, 56.5. So we're hovering right now right around the, Etienne was 55. You've got 56.5 here for JuJu Smith-Schuster, and then A-Rob is just a few picks before those two. But JuJu is a really talented player, and as much as I think that his stock as a number 1 receiver has kind of fallen, obviously we saw his free agent market be not quite as excitable as I think that he probably would hope in terms of his contract negotiations. But this is still a guy who has successful seasons with fantastic production on his resume. So we've seen him get the job done with Ben Roethlisberger early in his career. Now, the last couple of seasons have not been great, but there's still been high points. There's still been things that we can be excited about. And while he's only had 2 100 reception seasons or 100-plus target seasons, he is also someone who has had 3 separate occasions with 7 or more reception touchdowns. So you're getting a lot brought to the table here. It's just going to be a matter of how this thing plays out with Kansas City, because I think if you asked me today, I would say JuJu Smith-Schuster is the guy I'd have pegged as my number 1 receiver on that depth chart. I think Sky Moore is long-term the guy. I think he's fantastic. I love him. It's a conversation for a Dynasty video or article, something on sizzlefantasy.com. Whatever the case might be, we're going to talk a lot of Sky Moore in the future here. But for 2022 in a bubble, if we're looking at that, obviously through the redraft perspective, I think JuJu is the clear-cut option to be the top target at the wide receiver position for Pat Mahomes in the Chiefs offense. Now, obviously, I think Travis Kelce will be the number 1 offensive target, obviously the tight end position, but JuJu's got a great opportunity to crush this year. He did have back-to-back 900-plus yard seasons, that being his rookie season and then his sophomore year in the NFL, if you will, with 1,426 yards on 166 targets in that Pittsburgh offense. So this is a guy who can handle a high-volume workload. He's just had some injuries. Obviously, there's been the off-the-field distractions, which I'll let you guys be the judge of how much that played into his production and role on the team. Obviously, again, this past season, he was injured, so that was an issue, but you've got a lot to like here. And again, that stems from being the potential number 1 target at the wide receiver position for Patrick Mahomes in the 2022 season. So I'm high on JuJu. I've already drafted at least 2 or 3 shares of him in leagues this year. I'm probably going to scoop up more. For me, he's probably safest and best as a wide receiver too, but the situation is so great that if he's able to kind of flash back to some of those earlier season production numbers, get healthy, and stay on the right track for 17 games, he could be a fringe top 12 player and someone that kind of gets himself into the situation for maybe, again, a top 12 finisher. We'll see. It probably would have to be a PPR format because I think you're going to need a lot of volume. It's not someone who's had elite red zone and touchdown production. Again, he did have 3 7+ TD seasons, but that can be expanded upon potentially. Jerry Jeudy at number 4 here, the next name we're going to talk about in today's video, entering just his age 23 season. So we have not seen the best from Jerry Jeudy. This is still a guy who has a lot of room to improve as a player and can become quite a dominant, asset at the wide receiver position. He only played 10 games in 2021. He did play 16 in the 2020 season. But you've got yourself, and by the way, he is the player in today's episode who's going highest on draft boards. His ADP is 47.1, so a little bit earlier than the 5th round, which we kind of talked about, but he's right on the fringe of being kind of one of the last picks in 12-team leagues for the 4th round and in being an early 5th round pick, obviously, in those 12-team formats. So with Jerry Jeudy, the thing that I absolutely love to see here is the opportunity for growth. I looked at some of the efficiency metrics with quarterback play for Jerry Jeudy in his first 2 seasons. He's now entering into year 3 in the National Football League. And there is so much opportunity for that quarterback play to be improved, which I think will show up big time in his statistical production, that being Jerry Jeudy. As we get into year 3 here, obviously looking long-term to year 4, Russell Wilson is the game changer for this situation. So when I looked at the quarterback play for Jerry Jeudy in 2020, so you're still talking about a Drew Lock-led football team at times, he was 104th in his quality target rating. So that is terrible. 104th is essentially telling you that there are 32 teams in the National Football League, and he would be in the 4th group of 32 teams in terms of the quality targets that he was getting, which is absolutely abysmal and goes to show really how much out of his control some of the lack of production is. You also talk about, again, it's hard to break down some of the stats. I did pull one metric from 2021. We'll get to that in a second. Again, he only played 10 games, so it's a smaller sample size. And for me, it's harder to put, or it's not as clear-cut to put context behind the 2021 numbers, again, because he did have the ankle injury. But in terms of looking at his rookie season, he was 104th in quality target rating. He was 106th in his catchable target rate, which 71 out of his 113 targets were considered catchable. So you're talking about 42 uncatchable passes that he got in the 2020 season. Again, that being his rookie year where he did go north of 100 targets. That was a fantastic green light in itself that he saw 100-plus targets as a rookie. Again, 10-game sample size in 2021. How do you really want to weigh things there? You did have kind of a back and forth between Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock at times at the quarterback position, and obviously Denver had their struggles offensively at times throughout the season as well. But in that 2020 year, so you would think he would have gotten better this past season, but again, that injury kind of muddies up the water a little bit. Only 71 of his passes were catchable out of those 113. So that is god-awful. I expect nothing less of a major improvement in that category, especially with Russell Wilson's deep ball ability and just how he's going to run this offense. The reps, they've been training together a ton. You see stuff all over social media, obviously, with Jerry Jeudy and Russell Wilson repping together and obviously getting their chemistry down tight. So the sky's the limit for Jerry Jeudy, as I've said, with Travis Etienne. I think these are 2 of my favorite players in today's video. When you want to talk about Etienne and Jerry Jeudy, there's not a whole lot besides injuries that I think can stop him. I think Courtland Sutton's going to have a fantastic season as well. His ADP comes at a bit of a more discounted rate than Jerry Jeudy's does. I would expect probably a higher touchdown production number from Courtland Sutton this season. But I think the volume and the yards is going to be pushed in favor of Jerry Jeudy. And once those quarterback competencies are raised and the bar is kind of elevated there, again, to a significant amount, I think that that's going to bode very well for Jeudy. One last thing I wanted to touch on here before we move into our 5th and final player in today's episode. Thank you guys so much for sticking with me. Leave today's video with a like if you're enjoying things today. I wanted to talk through Seattle's offensive output the last 2 seasons and then kind of compare that to the last 2 to 3 years for Denver here. Obviously, the 3rd season is not really applicable because Jerry Jeudy was not a member of this offense. But you've got a situation here in 2021 where Denver had 19.7 points per game scored. That being literal basic football, they scored 19.7 points per game. That was their average offensive output, this Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater-led football team. The season before that, so Jerry Jeudy's rookie season, the team averaged 16.7 points per game. That is horrid. I mean, you're talking about bottom of the NFL, the bottom third of the league and very underwhelming numbers. For Seattle this past season, they scored 23.2 points per game, and they also missed Russell Wilson for a handful of contests with that mallet finger. So their team still had a touchdown difference between Denver 2 years ago and a 4-point difference nearly between Denver this year, again, playing Geno Smith as their starting quarterback for a handful of contests. The year before, when Russell Wilson played every game, they averaged 28.2 points per game. You're walking into a situation, if you're Russell Wilson, with better personnel, better talent, arguably a more modern and better coaching staff. That number should be a much improved count, so the total ceiling in offensive production for this Denver team should rise in 2022 here. And again, I think Jerry Jeudy is a primary beneficiary of that Russell Wilson situation. Last up here is Jalen Hurts. Now, Jalen Hurts is someone I'm super bullish on for the 2022 fantasy football season. I think he's absolutely going to crush it this year. While I don't love him as a passer, I think that his statistical numbers as a passer are going to rise and thus put him over the edge to finish as a potential QB1 overall. There is legitimate upside here when you factor in Jalen Hurts' ability as a rusher, the things he can do on the ground as a rushing threat in the red zone, scoring touchdowns. He's the total package for fantasy football. The quarterback position is able to be brought to the next level by these guys that run the football, use their legs, and rack up points much more efficiently, much more quickly. Your obviously Lamar Jacksons of the world. We're seeing guys like Josh Allen just kill it in the red zone, scoring a lot of touchdowns. And I think Jalen Hurts can be kind of that next breed of fantasy football players. I would be shocked to see him finish outside the top 5 this year. I'm excessively bullish, maybe to a fault, that he'll finish in the top 3. And I think that he has a fair shot to finish as the number 1 quarterback overall. We'll talk about why that is right now. So this past season, Hurts finished as the quarterback 9. He played in 15 games, so 2 possible starts were missed there. He averaged 21.2 fantasy points per game this past season. Again, that put him at the QB9 position. And if we look at Josh Allen, he averaged 24.56 points per game and finished as the QB1. So you've got roughly a 3.3 fantasy point per game margin that needs to be improved on Jalen Hurts' end to get him to that level of a player. And I think he absolutely can do it. Again, you're jumping into year 3, so more experience under his belt. You've got the primary box that needs to be checked, that rushing asset and value. That's taken care of. We know that that element is at play. And then you talk about how poor, and poor might be putting it nicely, his passing numbers were last season. 3,144 yards through the air, which is pretty underwhelming for an NFL passer, especially a guy who started 15 games, and 61.3% completion percentage, which puts him lower than some of the backups last season that were able to get quality play time due to injuries and whatnot. So you've got a guy who is doing below average things in terms of his completion percentage. His passing productivity in terms of his yards produced is very low, again, in the passing game. And he only had 16 passing touchdowns. And just to kind of frame that for reference for you all, Cooper Kupp had 16 receiving touchdowns last year. So every time Cooper Kupp caught a touchdown pass from Matt Stafford, Jalen Hurts was throwing 1 touchdown pass from the pocket. So very, very underwhelming, and he had 9 interceptions to go on top of that. Now, the interceptions is not something I'm going to be super picky about, even if he doesn't clean that up. I think that he's the type of guy who doesn't have elite precision or elite ball placement. So I don't think that he's going to necessarily become, an Aaron Rodgers level guy with throwing 5 or fewer interceptions. Heck, maybe Hurts throws 12, 13 picks next year. That's all fine. But when you introduce a guy in A.J. Brown to the situation, I think the passing numbers offensively, if A.J. is healthy a significant amount of the year, have to go up. You talk about having Dallas Goedert, Devontae Smith. Now you add in, again, A.J. Brown, a legitimate bona fide wide receiver 1 for a football team in the National Football League. And then you've also got, your Kenneth Gainwells out of the backfield and other guys who can fulfill key roles to get the ball out in space and to act as playmakers for this offense. I think this bodes very well for Jalen Hurts. I would expect his overall passing touchdown numbers, even if they go up to 20 TD passes, 21 TD passes, he maintains his level of rushing output and maybe increases his passing yardage from 3,100 yards to somewhere around 3,500. Maybe, 4K might be a bit of lofty expectations given what this team does on the ground. But there is area, and a lot of area, to improve here in terms of, again, a passing productive quarterback. Even if his completion percentage just rises by a few points to average levels, you're talking about a higher rate of passes completed, which is then netting you fantasy points and contributes to that yardage marker will rise and grow. So I see a lot of upside here for Jalen Hurts. I think that the floor intangibles as a rushing threat are amazing for fantasy football, and if you can lock those up, he's a must-have player. I'm going back and forth and debating if I'd rather have him or Kyler Murray. And that's a legitimate conversation I'm having internally because we've seen in back-to-back seasons, Kyler Murray gets injured down the stretch and his fantasy points, production, and reliability fade as soon as he gets nicked. Jalen Hurts is a bigger, thicker athlete that's able to take more hits, undergo more duress, and I think just stand up to, obviously contact and hits more than Murray is. So both of them being fantastic fantasy rushing threats at the QB position. I've had that debate multiple times on draft boards this season. So let me know your guys' thoughts down in the comment section below. I had a lot of fun talking through these 5 names. Again, I'm going to make more of these videos, so 5 must-have players. Keep your eye on, or keep your eyes on the lookout for more of these types of videos heading your way. I'll probably drop, a few videos of 5 must-avoid players, guys I don't want anything to do with on draft boards for this season. And obviously, we'll be having all kinds of drafts this summer. I do want to get out a high volume of draft videos for you guys to absorb throughout this offseason. All other types of analysis. I'll be doing ADP battles, which I like to call them, where I'll be taking 2 players, looking at this sheet, you've got Travis Etienne and JuJu Smith-Schuster. Now, typically, I like to keep it, the same position, but there's a lot of content coming your way, is the main message here this summer. So click that subscribe button if you're around here. Share the video with your friends. Share the SFS channel. Help us grow this community. I love doing this stuff for you guys. I'm full-time right now for the summer, so we've got a lot of awesome stuff coming your way. So thank you so much, guys. I'll see you next time. Peace out.